The wildlands of North America hold secrets that defy logic, places where the veil between the known and the utterly inexplicable seems terrifyingly thin. For decades, researchers have documented a chilling pattern of disappearances that occur under almost identical yet physically impossible circumstances. We are not talking about common mishaps: the lost hunter, the unprepared tourist, the tragic fall. We are discussing individuals who vanish without a trace, often highly experienced outdoorsmen, swallowed by the wilderness in mere seconds, leaving behind only clinical facts and a gaping void of answers. From the vast, unforgiving peaks of the Rockies to the ancient, dense forests of the Appalachians, these cases share unnerving commonalities: sudden, often localized weather anomalies, search dogs failing spectacularly, and the bizarre tendency for personal effects to be recovered miles away, in locations that defy the known laws of physics and human movement. These are the missing 411 clusters, and today we journey into one of the most enigmatic geographical hotspots for such phenomena: the unforgiving slopes of the Cascade Range in the Pacific Northwest. The Cascade Mountains, spanning from British Columbia down through Washington and Oregon, are a place of sublime beauty and immense, indifferent power. Covered in old-growth timber, deep valleys, and subject to rapid, violent meteorological shifts, they are the perfect backdrop for nature's cruelest tricks. But the disappearance of 38-year-old Arthur "Art" Fenton in the summer of 2011 stands apart, even within this sinister catalogue of unsolved mysteries. Art Fenton was not merely experienced, he was meticulous, bordering on obsessive about preparedness. His vanishing act was instantaneous, witnessed by no one, yet it was documented by strange forensic details that suggest not a natural accident, but perhaps an abrupt, inexplicable transportation event. Crucially, the final piece of evidence, Art's distinct high-visibility backpack, appeared 3 days later, not in some remote ravine, but directly within the frame of a Department of Natural Resources, DNR, environmental monitoring webcam, positioned on a peak 22 miles away from where Art was last seen. How did a heavy pack travel so far, so fast, in rugged terrain, without human interference? And where was the man who carried it? This is the story of Cascades 2011, a case that challenges every conventional search and rescue protocol and pushes us to consider that perhaps some places on this earth operate by a different, darker set of rules. Pay attention to the details, because the truth, if it exists, is hidden between the lines of the official report. Desapareció, ocaso contexto, Arthur Artu Fenton, a 38-year-old certified public accountant residing in Bellingham, Washington, was the epitome of preparedness. Standing 6 feet tall, physically fit, and possessing an almost clinical appreciation for risk assessment, Fenton treated his outdoor excursions with the same meticulous precision he applied to tax law. He was not a weekend warrior. He was a serious backpacker, intimately familiar with the unforgiving tapestry of the Cascade foothills, especially the area surrounding the Skykomish River Valley near the town of Index. On the morning of July 14, 2011, Fenton parked his aging but reliable Subaru Outback at the trailhead for the Lake Serene Boch Bridal Veil Falls area. The weather was idyllic: clear skies, low humidity, and a predicted high of 72 degrees Fahrenheit. Perfect conditions for the rugged 3-day solo loop he had planned. His itinerary, filed electronically with a close friend in Seattle, was excruciatingly detailed, including anticipated GPS coordinates for nightly camps, specific water sources, and an emergency check-in schedule. His equipment was top of the line: a bright orange, high-visibility Osprey pack, a satellite communication device, and enough rations and emergency gear for a week. The official report confirms that Fenton was carrying a minimum of 60 pounds, including a specialized camera set up for landscape photography, his primary objective for the trek. The trail itself offers a jarring dichotomy. Below, it's a relatively maintained forest path. Above, it quickly devolves into treacherous scrambles and dense, often misleading secondary growth that clings precariously to granite shelves. Fenton's objective for day one was to ascend rapidly to a seldom-used high alpine lake basin known locally as the Tangle, roughly 6,000 feet above sea level. Every piece of evidence suggests a man in control, operating within his known limits on a day where the natural world appeared to be smiling. This clinical context of absolute normalcy is critical because what happened next defied every principle of normal hiking behavior and survival. Etapa 3. O Momento Zero. Fenton's digital breadcrumbs ceased precisely at 1:47 p.m. July 14, 2011 too. His last recorded entry was not a distress signal, but a time-stamped photograph taken with his primary camera, geo-located deep within the protected national forest land, approximately 5 miles from the trailhead. The photo depicts an extremely localized, dense patch of low-lying fog, almost unnatural in its sharp boundary, clinging to a cluster of massive fir trees beside a small, unnamed tributary. The sky above the fog appears bright blue. The critical piece of information comes from a group of 3 amateur geologists, David, Laura, and Michael, who were conducting rock sample surveys about 500 yards away from Fenton's location, slightly downhill. They recalled the weather shifting with unnerving rapidity. David, interviewed extensively by the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office, described the experience. It was like someone dropped a curtain. One moment we had brilliant sun, the next the light went flat, and the temperature dropped maybe 10 degrees in as many seconds. The air just felt heavy, pressurized. At 1:40 p.m., the geologist saw Art Fenton. He was standing on a small, rocky prominence, examining a map, looking relaxed and in no apparent hurry. He was highly visible in his bright clothing. David momentarily turned his back to retrieve a sample bag. When he looked up, roughly 60 seconds later, Fenton was gone. This wasn't a case of someone moving quickly down the trail. The path Fenton was preparing to take was a visible, open scramble. He just wasn't there, Laura recounted years later. It felt wrong. The forest had gone silent. The birds had stopped. The geologists waited a nervous 15 minutes, calling out, their voices muffled by the deepening, localized atmospheric conditions. When no reply came, and the strange, thick air persisted, they made the logical, though ultimately flawed, assumption that Fenton had simply moved into the tree line to set up camp, perhaps trying to capture the eerie photographic conditions. They moved on, unknowingly leaving behind the last known witnesses to Art Fenton's brief presence in the Cascades. Etapa 4. O desaparecimento. The disappearance of Arthur Fenton was, by all accounts, immediate and surgically clean. He was in a known location, visible to witnesses, highly experienced, and vanished within an estimated window of 60 to 90 seconds. The location itself did not offer hidden crevasses or sudden cliffs that would account for a catastrophic fall without an audible scream or sound of crashing gear. The geologists confirmed the immediate silence, an absence of noise far more disturbing than a struggle. When Fenton failed to check in with his friend in Seattle by 8 p.m. that evening, July 14th, the alarm protocol was initiated. Initial reports to the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office Search and Rescue, SAR, emphasized the unusual nature of the witness accounts, the sudden silence and the fast-moving, localized atmospheric disturbance. SR teams mobilized at 4 a.m. on July 15th, beginning their grid search from the trailhead and utilizing Fenton's last confirmed GPS coordinates from his Subaru's onboard navigation system. Investigators quickly zeroed in on the last known location, the small, rocky prominence where Fenton was mapping. What they found immediately introduced the first set of profound anomalies. Although the terrain was moist from the strange, localized fog reported the previous day, there was no sign of a slip or struggle. There were, however, 2 sets of fresh, deep boot prints identifiable as Fenton's size 11 hiking boots. The prints led directly to the edge of the prominence and then simply stopped. There were no drag marks, no sign of a subsequent step, and critically, no prints leading in any direction away from the spot, despite the soft, damp soil. It was as if Fenton had been lifted vertically from the ground or had ceased to exist at that precise point. The second anomaly was the partial discovery of Fenton's gear. Approximately 15 feet downhill from the boot prints, SAR recovered his specialized Nikon D90 camera, equipped with a wide-angle lens. The camera body was intact, but the shoulder strap, designed to be heavy-duty nylon, was cleanly severed, not torn, suggesting either an extremely sharp blade or immense, abrupt tension. The final photograph on the memory card, captured at 1:47 p.m., was the image of the strange fog patch. The timestamp confirms this was the moment of cessation. Art Fenton was, statistically speaking, simply there, and then he was not. Etapa 5. A busca inmediata. The initial search effort, launched on July 15th, was massive and meticulously organized, reflecting the high-profile nature of a seemingly impossible vanishing act. The Snohomish County SAR mobilized over 50 ground personnel, including specialized mountain rescue teams, rappelling experts, and 3 K9 units. The sheer dedication of the volunteers and law enforcement reflected the unsettling facts of the case: a highly prepared man vanishing without any apparent struggle near a frequented trail. The priority area was a 1 square mile zone surrounding the last known boot prints. The terrain was challenging, steep, covered in thick underbrush, and riddled with granite outcrops, but thoroughly navigable for trained professionals. However, the K9 units immediately exhibited anomalous behavior, a signature element in many unexplained missing person cases within the national parks. The 3 scent dogs, 2 bloodhounds and 1 German shepherd trained in air scenting, were brought to the location where Fenton's camera was found. Initially they were eager, picking up a clear scent of human presence, but as they were guided toward the cliff edge where the prints stopped, all 3 dogs stalled. The handlers reported extreme anxiety in the animals. The bloodhounds began whining and pulling away from the target area, exhibiting what their handler, veteran Deputy Marcus Hale, described as unusual, deep-seated fear. The German shepherd, typically fearless, tucked its tail and refused to cross a specific invisible boundary near the stopping point of Fenton's last step. Deputy Hale noted in his formal report that the scent seemed to simply dissipate at that precise location, as if the physical space held a vacuum where the human trail should have continued. The dogs could not proceed, not because the scent faded naturally, but because they seemed genuinely terrified of the area. This immediate failure of the professional K9 units, combined with the lack of physical evidence, no discarded clothing, no blood, no evidence of a slip, forced the incident commander to expand the search radius dramatically, shifting the focus from accidental injury to something more deliberate or, unsettlingly, paranormal. Helicopters were dispatched later that afternoon, utilizing FLIR, forward-looking infrared technology, but the dense canopy of the old-growth forest rendered the thermal imaging largely ineffective, confirming only the vast indifference of the Cascades. Durante, Etapa 6, a busker professional. Over the next 72 hours, the search for Art Fenton transitioned from an urgent rescue operation into a high-intensity recovery effort involving state, county, and federal resources, including specialized teams from the National Park Service. The search area was segmented into 10 distinct zones, covering approximately 20 square miles of rugged forest, focusing on creek beds, ravines, and high-probability fall zones, assuming the K9 failure was a fluke and Fenton had simply wandered or suffered a rapid traumatic injury. The effort involved sophisticated technologies, none of which yielded definitive results. Drones equipped with high-resolution optical sensors mapped the upper canopy, looking for disturbances or signs of Fenton's high-visibility orange pack. Ground teams conducted exhaustive parallel line sweeps, often traversing the same square footage multiple times. The search reports from this period emphasize the sheer lack of any trace evidence. It was noted repeatedly that Art Fenton carried comprehensive survival gear, including signaling mirrors, a whistle, and a two-way satellite messenger. If he were injured and alive, the protocol dictated he would activate at least one of these devices. The satellite messenger remained silent. The initial prevailing theory among SAR veterans was vortex theory, the possibility that Fenton, perhaps suffering from hypothermia or a sudden head injury, had begun walking aimlessly downhill, traversing terrain that defied normal expectation. This theory attempts to explain why highly trained individuals in missing 4111 cases are often found miles away from the initial search area, sometimes completely naked or with paradoxical injuries. However, the terrain near Fenton's last sighting was so steep and covered in dense vegetation that traversing 20 miles in any direction without leaving a physical trail of damage would be virtually impossible. The official search timeline was set to conclude on July 21st, 1 week after the disappearance, barring any major discovery. As the search intensified and frustrations mounted, the feeling of searching for a ghost in an empty landscape, a completely unexpected and unprecedented development occurred, shifting the entire investigation from a simple missing person case to a true forensic anomaly. Durante, Etapa 7, Anomalia, on the morning of Rome. July 17th, 2011. 3 days after Art Fenton vanished, an environmental science technician based in Seattle monitoring remote weather patterns noticed something unusual in the daily feed from a DNR-operated monitoring camera. This fixed-position camera, installed atop Mount Persis, roughly 22 air miles east-northeast of Fenton's last known location, was primarily used to track regional cloud movement and snowfall. At 9:15 a.m. PST, the camera captured a clear, high-resolution image. In the foreground, resting conspicuously on a slab of moss-covered granite, was Art Fenton's bright orange osprey pack. The pack was unmistakable, its distinct shade, the specific model known to the investigators, and the presence of a unique reflective strip confirmed its identity. The discovery immediately generated both intense relief and profound confusion. The pack was heavy, estimated at around 50 pounds, still containing most of Fenton's critical survival gear, food, and clothing. The location on Mount Persis was incredibly difficult to access, requiring several hours of dedicated scrambling, even for an unburdened, healthy hiker. For Fenton to have carried the pack there in 72 hours, navigating 22 miles of trackless, vertical terrain, was physically improbable, especially if he was injured. A rapid deployment team, utilizing a high-altitude helicopter, reached the pack's location within 2 hours. What they documented upon arrival solidified the case as an extreme anomaly. The pack was leaning against the rock, oriented as if recently set down. There were no drag marks beneath it, contradicting the idea that it had rolled or fallen there. Crucially, the pack's main zipper compartment was slightly open. Inside, untouched, were Art Fenton's wallet, identification, and keys to his Subaru. Everything that an individual would need for survival, or everything they would take if they were leaving the mountains, was present. However, 3 items were conspicuously missing: Fenton's high-quality topographical maps of the region, the specialized hiking axe he always carried, and the satellite communication device. Why would an experienced hiker discard his maps and axe, hike 22 miles in 3 days, and then deliberately leave his heavy pack, keys, and wallet behind on a remote peak? The only logical explanation remaining was a non-human mechanism of transportation. Etapa 8, Vacuo. The recovery of the backpack on Mount Persis served only to deepen the mystery, forcing the search teams to recalibrate their entire strategy. The focus shifted from the original disappearance site to the 22-mile corridor between the 2 points, based on the unsettling premise that Fenton, or something that took him, had moved across that rugged landscape. The Snohomish County SR launched a new, intensive search of Mount Persis and the surrounding high-altitude areas. This was arguably the most complex phase, involving the riskier deployment of mountaineering teams searching cliffs and ice fields. Despite the recovered pack providing a precise new focal point, Art Fenton remained invisible. No footprints were found near the pack, suggesting whoever placed it there was either highly adept at leaving no trace or, again, defying conventional movement. The missing topographical maps were viewed as perhaps the only sensible clue. If Fenton had decided to abandon his pack, he would need the maps to navigate his way back to civilization. But if he had the maps, why not take his keys and wallet? The case gained significant media traction, not only regionally but nationally, highlighting the bizarre circumstances. Public theories abounded, ranging from an elaborate prank, discounted due to the severity of the logistics and terrain, to involvement with unknown indigenous communities or even accidental military extraction, all highly speculative. By August 1, 2011, nearly 3 weeks after Fenton's disappearance, the official, publicly funded search effort was scaled back and formally concluded. The sheriff's office issued a somber statement detailing the exhaustion of all conventional resources, acknowledging the unprecedented nature of the forensic findings. The inability of highly trained dogs to track the scent and the impossible movement of the heavy pack were cited as compelling factors that defied standard protocols. For Art Fenton's family, the conclusion of the official search brought devastating finality mixed with paralyzing uncertainty. His close friend and emergency contact, Sarah Jennings, offered a painful reflection to the local press. If he had fallen, if he had been attacked by an animal, we would have found something. But to find the pack 22 miles away with his ID still inside, it's worse than not knowing. It means he was actively somewhere, or something was active with him, for that pack to end up there. The vast, indifferent wilderness had swallowed the experienced hiker, spitting out only the evidence of his preparedness in a mockery of forensic science. Etapa 9, a descoberta u faltadella. Years passed, turning the immediate shock of the Cascades 2011 incident into a cold clinical file in the archives of unsolved missing persons cases. Art Fenton's case became a recurring benchmark for the missing 411 community, a textbook example of an experienced individual disappearing from a specific geographical cluster, exhibiting canine failure and involving the bizarre translocation of personal effects. In the ensuing decade, the only potentially relevant discovery occurred in the spring of 2019, 8 years after Fenton vanished, and it was perhaps as unsettling as the initial disappearance. A solo prospector, operating near the headwaters of the Skykomish River, approximately 5 miles north of the Mount Persis Pack recovery site, stumbled upon a makeshift shelter beneath a massive, overturned root ball. The shelter itself was rudimentary but intentionally constructed. Inside, the prospector found a single, non-commercial grade topographical map, folded and tucked into a waterproof sleeve. The map was identified by a private investigator hired by the Fenton family as one of the 3 missing items from Art Fenton's pack. This map was heavily marked with unfamiliar symbols, geometric shapes, circles, and handwritten coordinates that did not correspond to any known trail system or established survey marker in the region. Forensic analysis performed by the private team could not definitively link the markings to Fenton's hand, but the map itself was undeniably his. Why would the map, an item crucial for survival, be found 8 years later, tucked away in a hidden shelter, roughly 27 miles from where Fenton was last seen, but only 5 miles from where his pack was abandoned? The discovery raised 2 immediate conflicting theories. Either Art Fenton had survived for an unknown period, living remotely and drawing strange coded symbols on his map before succumbing to elements or injury, or an unknown third party, operating within the isolation of the Cascades, had somehow gained possession of the map and intentionally hidden it. Search efforts in 2019 near the map's location yielded no further sign of human remains, clothing, or the missing hiking axe or satellite communicator. The map became another piece of the puzzle that, rather than providing clarity, only amplified the incomprehensibility of the situation. Art Fenton remains officially listed as missing, presumed deceased, but the facts of the case dictate that his fate was anything but natural. Etapa 10. As teorías, the inexplicable elements of Art Fenton's disappearance, the sudden localized fog, the absolute cessation of the scent trail for the K9 units, the impossible 22-mile translocation of a heavy backpack, and the later recovery of the marked map, have generated theories that veer sharply away from conventional search and rescue explanations. The official clinical theory remains that Fenton suffered a rapid, acute psychological or medical event, leading to hyperpsychosis or disorientation syndrome. In this scenario, he could have frantically discarded his equipment, then somehow stumbled or scrambled across the vast distance, perhaps briefly surviving before succumbing to exposure in a place still unsearched. However, this fails to explain the camera strap being cleanly severed, the dog's reaction, and the pack being placed neatly on the granite slab 22 miles away. The most widely discussed theories among independent investigators align with the broader missing 4111 patterns, suggesting non-conventional forces were at play. The interdimensional or portal theory. This proposes that Fenton inadvertently stumbled into a geographical hotspot or a naturally occurring temporal anomaly. The sudden fog and temperature drop reported by the geologists could be indicative of a localized energy shift. The theory suggests Fenton, or his pack, could have been temporarily displaced in space, explaining the instantaneous vanishing and the pack's reappearance miles away, effectively bypassing the physical distance. The strange symbols on the recovered map might represent Fenton's attempt to chart or understand a distorted reality he briefly experienced. The predator theory, non-terrestrial. Given the complete lack of blood, struggle, or remains, some suggest a technologically advanced, perhaps non-terrestrial intelligence was involved. The clean cut on the camera strap, the vertical disappearance, and the targeted removal of the communication device, ensuring no distress signal, point toward an organized extraction. The backpack and subsequent map could be viewed as deliberate gifts or forensic taunts left behind by the entity, demonstrating its ability to move objects seamlessly across great distances. The deep woods human interaction theory. A darker yet terrestrial theory posits the involvement of highly secretive individuals or a survivalist cult operating deep within the restricted areas of the Cascades. They could have captured Fenton, appropriated his gear, and transported the pack to Mount Persis as a decoy, knowing the extreme terrain would make the subsequent search nearly impossible. This theory best accommodates the discovery of the mapped shelter, suggesting someone was actively utilizing deep forest caches, though it still fails to explain the K9 behavior near the initial disappearance point. All these theories lack definitive evidence, relying instead on the absence of conventional facts. What is undeniable is that the environment surrounding Art Fenton's disappearance failed to adhere to the predictable laws of nature and human behavior. Etapa 11. O Impacto. The case of Arthur Fenton served as a chilling confirmation for the hypothesis that certain areas within the Cascade Range harbor disproportionate numbers of unresolved vanishings. His story resonated deeply within the hiking community, not as a cautionary tale about poor preparation, but as a stark warning about the sheer, inexplicable malice the wilderness can sometimes exhibit. In the years following the 2011 disappearance, The trails near the Skycomish River Valley, including the path to Lake Serene, experienced a noticeable, albeit temporary, drop in solo hiker traffic. Local authorities reported increased scrutiny from both independent researchers and the media, forcing the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office to routinely reaffirm the details of the highly unusual search failure. The DNR's environmental monitoring camera on Mount Persis, which inadvertently captured the key piece of evidence, became a morbid point of pilgrimage for curiosity seekers, who began posting amateur satellite photos attempting to discern the exact coordinates of the pack's resting spot. More broadly, Fenton's case contributed significantly to the evolving understanding of missing 411 phenomena. It cemented the pattern of highly experienced individuals being targeted, the prevalence of unusual localized weather conditions preceding the event, and the hallmark failure of specialized tracking dogs. It demonstrated that these disappearances are not random acts of fate, but potentially symptomatic of a persistent unknown factor indigenous to specific geographic areas that seem to repel investigation and confound human technology. The official records remain open, cataloging the facts. July 14, 2011, a man prepared for everything but the impossible took one last step and ceased to be trackable. His pack traveled an unbelievable distance without him, guided by an unseen hand or force, only to be deposited in view of a technological eye 22 miles away. The fear that Art Fenton's case instilled was the realization that in the deep, silent woods of the Cascades, the greatest danger might not be the bear or the fall, but the possibility that you might encounter something entirely outside the established parameters of reality. Etapa 12. Conclusão filosófica. The case of Arthur Fenton serves as a haunting epitaph for human certainty in the face of absolute wilderness. We enter these vast, ancient forests armed with GPS, satellite communicators, and survival training, believing we have mapped and conquered every variable. Yet the Cascades 2011 incident reminds us that beneath the surface of the navigable world, there are pockets of instability, regions where the laws of physics appear to bend, and where human life can be extinguished in the time it takes to blink. Art Fenton was an experienced navigator, a meticulous planner, and a disciplined hiker. His disappearance was not a failing of preparation. It was an act of severance from reality. The facts are immutable. He stopped. The dogs feared the void where he stood, and his heavy belongings traveled across impossible terrain to rest directly in the lens of a government camera. We are left only with the strange evidence of his passage, a severed camera strap, a trail of footprints that abruptly ends, and a hidden map scribbled with cryptic symbols, perhaps the last vestiges of a mind attempting to communicate an unspeakable truth. What happened to Art Fenton? Did he walk into a localized time slip, emerging 22 miles away, disoriented, only to set his pack down and wander off with his axe and map into the deeper, higher elevations? Was he the victim of a coordinated, intelligent extraction that utilized the wilderness as a seamless curtain? Or do these mountains simply house phenomena that our modern science is ill-equipped to detect and our human minds are unprepared to comprehend? The official file remains open, a testament to the unclosed chapter in the region's history. The only certainty is the chilling lesson the wilderness provides. When the forest wants you, it doesn't leave a trace, or if it does, it leaves something deliberately misleading, something designed to suggest that the greatest mystery is not where the victim went, but what force possesses the power to manipulate reality itself. We close the file on Cascades 2011, but the unease remains.